Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to try to understand the core philosophy of Sikhism through a single fascinating lecture on Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism. Our source material is a lecture in Hindi by Osho, who was a well-known spiritual teacher. Think of it like we've both traveled back in time, and we're sitting under a starry night sky, listening to a captivating storyteller, sharing the life and teachings of Guru Nanak. You ready to get started?
Yes, absolutely. I think what's so captivating about this approach is that it allows us to decipher the very essence of Sikhism by delving into the life of the man who started it all. It's like looking at the roots of a tree to understand how it grew so tall.
Okay, let's unpack this. Osho begins with a story about young Nanak and a persistent puppy hubbard. You know those birds that call out relentlessly for their mates? Well, this story acts as a beautiful foreshadowing of Nanak's lifelong yearning for the divine, a yearning that ultimately shaped Sikhism.
Yeah, it's a really powerful way to illustrate the importance of devotion in Sikhism. But what's truly remarkable is that Nanak didn't find enlightenment through rigorous practices like yoga or meditation. He found it through the power of song.
I've always been struck by how music can evoke such deep emotions and connect us to something larger than ourselves. Do you think that's what drew Nanak to song as a path to enlightenment?
I think you're onto something. The emphasis on song and celebration in Sikhism highlights its joyful and accessible nature. It's a path of devotion that's open to everyone, and you don't have to renounce the world or punish yourself to find the divine. It's about embracing life's joys and recognizing the divine spark within those experiences.
That's a really refreshing perspective. It makes spirituality feel less intimidating and more like something we can integrate into our everyday lives. Okay, so let's move on to this almost mythical story of Nanak disappearing into a river for 3 days. When he emerges, he's completely transformed. What's the significance of this story?
This story is a symbolic representation of ego death and spiritual rebirth. It's about dying to your old self and emerging as a new being, a concept that's central to many spiritual traditions, including Sikhism. In fact, it even connects to the third day tradition in Sikhism. The third day after someone passes away holds a special significance. It's seen as a period of spiritual transition, echoing Nanak's own transformation.
So the story of Nanak disappearing in the river is like a blueprint for the spiritual transformation that Sikhs strive for.
Exactly. It represents the shedding of the ego and the awakening to a deeper reality. And that brings us to the Mool Mantar, the opening verse of the Japji Sahib, which is a central prayer in Sikhism.
Right, the Mool Mantar. It starts with Onkar Satnam, which translates to there is one God, truth is his name. I have to admit, I've always found this phrase to be deeply profound, but also a bit mysterious. Can you help us unpack it?
Absolutely. It highlights two key concepts. First, Ek Onkar emphasizes the idea of oneness, the interconnectedness of everything in the universe, and the belief that everything emanates from a single divine source. It's like realizing we're all waves in the same vast ocean, interconnected and ultimately part of the same source.
That makes me think about how isolating and disconnected modern life can feel sometimes. Do you think embracing the concept of Ek Onkar could help us navigate those feelings of isolation?
I think that's a really powerful insight. Recognizing our interconnectedness can be a powerful antidote to feelings of isolation. The second part, Satnam, or truth being God's name, suggests that the divine is not just an objective reality, but also a subjectively experienced truth.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this idea of truth as a subjective experience. Is it kind of like we can prove scientific truths through experiments, but we experience divine truth through devotion and connection?
That's a brilliant analogy. Think of it like the difference between knowing about love and actually feeling it. Both are real, but one is experienced internally, while the other can be observed externally. Sikhism views the divine as both this grand cosmic force and the deeply personal experience of truth and connection.
So it's not just about intellectually understanding the concept of God, but about cultivating a personal relationship with the divine. I'm really starting to see how Guru Nanak's teachings weave together the personal and the cosmic. It's not about escaping the world to find God, but about recognizing the divine within ourselves and in the world around us.
You're absolutely right. And this brings us to another fundamental concept in Sikhism, Karta Purush, the creator.
I'm eager to hear how this fits into the picture.
To explain Karta Purush, Osho uses the analogy of a dancer and their dance. The creator isn't separate from creation, but rather the very act of creating itself. Just like the dancer and the dance are inseparable, the divine is interwoven into the very fabric of existence.
That's such a beautiful analogy. It really emphasizes that in Sikhism, God is not some distant figure. but an active force within creation. This feels so different from traditions that emphasize a separation between God and the world.
It's a key distinction, and it has significant implications for how Sikhs live their lives. It's not about seeking an escape from the world, but about recognizing the divine spark within every aspect of life and striving to live in accordance with that truth.
So we've been exploring this idea that the divine, this creative force, is interwoven into the very fabric of existence. But how do we connect with that force in a practical way?
That's where the concept of hukam comes into play. It's a word that encapsulates the idea of divine will or cosmic order.
Okay, hukam. This is a concept I've heard before, but I'm not sure I fully grasp it.
It's definitely a complex idea. Hukam suggests there's a higher intelligence orchestrating the universe, not in a controlling way, but like a conductor guiding a symphony. And the path to peace, according to Sikhism, lies in surrendering to this flow.
Surrendering to the flow, it sounds so peaceful. But I think a lot of us, myself included, struggle with control. We want to dictate the course of our lives, map out every detail. Is that something Sikhism directly addresses?
It absolutely does. Osho shares a story about Guru Nanak that I think perfectly illustrates this concept of surrender. Nanak was visiting a wealthy man who put on this lavish feast in his honor. At the same time, a poor man named Lalo invited Nanak to his humble home for a simple meal of roti, a flatbread.
A feast versus a simple roti. It sounds like a classic story of contrasts. Where's this going?
Here's the interesting part. Nanak takes some food from the rich man in one hand and Lalo's roti in the other. When he squeezes them, milk flows from the roti, symbolizing purity and honesty, but blood drips from the rich man's food.
Wow, that's quite an image. It's a powerful statement about where true value lies.
Right. The story isn't about wealth or poverty. It's highlighting that purity comes from within. It's a direct challenge to the ego's desire for control and material possessions.
I think this really resonates with the learner archetype, this desire to understand what truly matters and how to live a meaningful life.
Absolutely. And it speaks to a universal human struggle. How do we find peace amidst the chaos and constant striving of modern life? Sikhism suggests that the answer lies in surrendering to hukam, to the flow of the universe.
But wouldn't surrendering to hukam mean giving up on goals, ambitions, basically everything that drives us?
That's a common misconception. Surrendering to hukam isn't about passivity, it's about shifting your perspective. It's accepting what is recognizing the limitations of your control and working in harmony with the universe rather than fighting against it.
So it's like instead of frantically swimming against the current, we learn to ride the waves. That actually sounds incredibly liberating.
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with a greater purpose and trusting that even challenges have a place in the unfolding of your life. Osho tells another story about Ibrahim, an enlightened slave, that further illuminates this concept. Ibrahim had completely surrendered to the will of his master, demonstrating a level of acceptance that astonished even the master himself.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about Ibrahim and what he represents in this context.
Ibrahim's surrender wasn't about blind obedience. It was about recognizing a deeper truth, that true peace comes from letting go of the ego's need to control every outcome. Even the master realized that Ibrahim had discovered a level of contentment that wealth and power couldn't provide.
It reminds me of the saying, less is more. Sometimes letting go of our attachments can lead to a richer, more fulfilling experience of life. But honestly, completely surrendering to hukam sounds pretty daunting. Do you have any personal reflections on this concept? Have you ever found yourself wrestling with the desire to control outcomes?
You know, I think we all grapple with that. To some extent, there's this constant internal tug of war between wanting to direct our lives and accepting what is, for me, studying Sikhism has been a reminder that sometimes the most powerful action we can take is to simply let go.
That's a really insightful perspective, and it makes me think about the practical side of all this.
Yeah.
How do we actually cultivate this sense of surrender in our daily lives? What are some tools or practices that Sikhs use to align themselves with hukam? So we've been talking about this idea of surrendering to hukam, this divine flow of the universe, but I have to admit it all feels a bit abstract. What does it actually look like to live in hukam?
It's a great question. It's one thing to intellectually grasp the concept, but how do we actually embody it in our day-to-day lives? Well, Sikhism provides a framework for this, a set of practices that help cultivate this inner surrender.
Okay, so give me the hukam for beginners guide. What are some of these practices?
One of the foundational practices is Simran. It involves the repetition of God's name or specific mantras. It's a form of meditation that helps quiet the mind and cultivate a sense of connection with the divine. It's about shifting your focus inward, away from the constant chatter of the external world.
You know, earlier we were talking about how Guru Nanak found enlightenment through song. Does music play a role in Simran or other Sikh practices?
Absolutely. Kirtan, which is the singing of devotional hymns, is another central practice in Sikhism. It's often a communal experience bringing people together in celebration and reverence for the divine.
It sounds like both Simran and Kirtan are about creating a space for connection, whether it's an internal connection through meditation or an external connection through shared music and devotion.
You've hit the nail on the head. Both practices help us tap into that sense of oneness that is so central to Sikhism. But there's another aspect of living in hukam that extends beyond personal practice, seva, selfless service.
Okay, Seva, tell me more about how this fits into the picture.
Seva is about taking that inner connection with the divine and expressing it through acts of service to others. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all beings and contributing to the well-being of the community without any expectation of reward.
I'm hearing this theme of connection woven throughout all these practices, connection to the divine, connection to the community. It's like Sikhism is saying that we can't truly experience peace and fulfillment in isolation.
That's a beautiful observation, and the practice of seva is a powerful way to embody that understanding. It's about putting your faith into action, demonstrating your gratitude for the divine through acts of kindness and service. It doesn't have to be grand gestures either. It can be as simple as helping a neighbor, volunteering your time, or just offering a kind word to someone in need.
I think this idea of Seva really speaks to the learner archetype, this desire not just to gain knowledge, but to use that knowledge to make a positive impact in the world.
Exactly, and that's ultimately what all these practices, Simran, Kirtan, Seva, are leading to. They help us align ourselves with hukam, to surrender to the divine flow, and find that deep inner peace that transcends the ups and downs of life.
It's a path that seems to beautifully blend the personal and the universal, the inner journey, with outward action. It's about recognizing the divine within ourselves and the world around us, and then living in a way that reflects that understanding.
That's a wonderful way to summarize it, and it really speaks to the heart of Guru Nanak's teachings. He offered a path to enlightenment that's accessible to everyone, a path rooted in joy service, and a deep recognition of our interconnectedness.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the philosophy of Guru Nanak, I'm left with this thought. Could embracing hukam, surrendering to the flow of life, be a key to finding greater peace in our own often chaotic world? It feels like a radical act in a society that values control and individualism above all else. But maybe, just maybe, letting go is the key to truly finding ourselves and our place in the grand scheme of things.
It's a question worth pondering, a path worth exploring, and perhaps in letting go, we discover a deeper sense of purpose and connection, allowing life to unfold in all its beauty and grace.
Please like, share, and subscribe.